What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for the Week 4 College Football Playoff Eliminator, and we have many more eliminations this week. We're going to take a look at those, see who is still in the race, even though they have a loss, and then look at what that updated playoff picture looks like now after 3 weeks of football. So let's start with the teams that were already eliminated coming into this week. So these teams were already out of it. Every group of 5 team. I know some people were talking about maybe Marshall. Well, they just lost, so we don't even have to worry about that. But yeah, there's is no group of 5 team that has a chance to make the college football playoff. No one's going to have a good enough resume, even if they do go undefeated. And there's only a few group of 5 teams left that are undefeated. Not many at all. I don't even know how many there are, but I don't think there are many. Army, an independent, all the independents pretty much out of this thing now, except for one team, or they already were coming in. Boston College, Colorado, Nebraska, New Mexico State, Notre Dame, UConn, UMass, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia. All those teams were eliminated after week 2. All right, how about the new eliminations this week? Arizona State, tough loss for them. They now have 2 losses. As they lost to, I think, Eastern Michigan. Georgia Tech loses to Ole Miss, their second loss of the year. Liberty's out of it. They had to go undefeated. That was their only chance. Louisville losing to Florida State. That's their second loss. Northwestern lost to an FCS. They're definitely out of it now. I think they were pretty much already out. Purdue with a second loss. South Carolina with a second loss. All of these teams are eliminated as we are, again, heading into week 4. So a lot of teams already done with any hope of making the college football playoff. Let's look at some teams that have one loss that aren't technically out of it. If they were to win out, they may or may not get in, but they're just probably not. I mean, there's really no one has a realistic expectation of any of these teams winning out. So Arizona, I mean, they're not winning out. Auburn, Cal, Illinois, Kansas State, Missouri, Stanford, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Vanderbilt, and Virginia. I just don't see any of these teams. I mean, it's like less than 1% chance that any of these teams would go undefeated the rest of the way. I know people are going to point to Texas A&M. Even if they did, well, I guess if they won out, they probably would get in. But it's kind of tough to say what the committee would do because they'd have that loss to App State. I could even see a scenario where Texas A&M wins out, and let's say Alabama loses only to Texas A&M, and Alabama's still going to be ranked ahead of Texas A&M just because Texas A&M lost to App State. That would be an interesting scenario there. But yeah, none of these teams, I don't think anyone really has, like I said, any realistic hope for any of these teams to win the rest of their games. All right, teams that I think, if these teams win out, I think they have a really, really, really good chance of making the playoff if they win out. They're almost guaranteed to get in, and I think you could make it. It's unlikely for a lot of these teams, but I think you could at least make a little bit of a case for these teams possibly winning out. Baylor, tough road in the Big 12, obviously. BYU is interesting. If they went out, I'm not sure what would happen. They're going to need the teams on their schedule to have good years. It looks like Notre Dame's not going to have a good year, so that's a quality win that BYU will not be able to get. And they've already lost to Oregon. They need Baylor to go 10-2. They need Arkansas maybe to go 10-2. They need some of these things to happen, but I think they're still alive. I think they're still alive with one loss. Florida definitely still alive. If they win out, I think they're in. If Iowa wins out, they're in. Seems pretty unlikely with the offense that they have going right now, but they have a really good defense, so I guess you never know. LSU has a lot of talent. Again, none of these teams I think are top contenders or anything, but they still, I think you have to give them a little bit of hope. It's less than 5%, I think, for these teams, for most of them, but it's a little bit more than less than 1%, like we mentioned with the other teams. Miami, I think they've got a 5-10% chance of winning out. It'll be tough for them possibly having to beat Clemson twice, but this is still a good team. And I know I picked them to go to the college football playoff. I watched the Texas A&M game, and I came away thinking that Miami is about as good as I thought they were going to be. They just didn't play that game to win, and I've talked about that before. Just really disappointed with their effort in that game and just the conservative play calling and things like that. Michigan State, look, they lost on the road at Washington. They still got everything in front of them. Mississippi State, if they went out in the SEC, and Mississippi State's still a good team. I think Alabama's the one team you'd say that probably, I mean, they're just not going to beat Alabama more than likely. But if they were able to somehow win that game, it's not crazy to think that they couldn't win their other games. Again, this is a quality team. Oregon bouncing back. It looks like they weren't as bad as we thought from the Georgia game. They are still a really good team. Georgia's just that good. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. Texas still alive, and one loss to Alabama definitely not going to hurt you. We've seen this team really bounce back in the second half last week. We saw them play really well against Alabama. Perhaps they could get into this conversation if they can get hot and win the rest of their games. If they win the rest of their games, they will be in this conversation, obviously. Utah, tough loss on the road at Florida, but they're still in pretty good shape with all these games in the Pac-12 coming up. In Wisconsin, a loss to Washington State makes it tough, but if they run the table and they win the Big Ten, they will be in. Iowa and Wisconsin, two teams that a lot of people were picking in the preseason to win the Big Ten. Doesn't look like that's going to happen, but it's still possible. That division wide open, so you never know. And it would be really interesting to see one of these teams. What would happen if they won the Big Ten with 2 losses? Would they possibly have a case for the college football playoff? That would definitely be interesting. I don't really see either one of them beating Ohio State or Michigan State or Penn State in a Big 12 championship game. But again, you never know. So these are the teams that are still alive that have a loss. Pretty soon we'll have to probably put up a graphic to show the undefeated teams, because those are starting to narrow down just a little bit. It's been to where there were so many undefeated teams. I wasn't going to do a graphic to show all those teams, but we're getting close to that point. So what does the playoff picture look like now? No change for me. I think it's exactly the same. Again, if we're talking about the favorites winning out, not my prediction, I'll do my prediction later this week. But if we're talking about the favorites winning out, Georgia, I believe, is going to be favored in the rest of their games. Ohio State, Alabama, same thing. I think Georgia would be favored over Alabama in the SEC championship based off of where the teams are right now. That's going to put Georgia as the 1 seed and move Alabama down to the 3 seed, Ohio State the 2 seed. Of course, one game could change this. If Alabama loses a regular season game, I think you bump them out, assuming they lose to Georgia. Let's say Michigan beats Ohio State. They're going to go to number 2. So a lot of things can definitely still happen, but this is just kind of the most likely scenario based on the favorites winning out. Michigan with 1 loss would have a great opportunity still to get in there. Oklahoma appears to be the favorites in the Big 12. USC the favorites in the Pac-12. Clemson in the ACC. What would be really interesting is if we had, let's say, a 1-loss Michigan with their only loss coming to Ohio State, a 1-loss Oklahoma, conference champ, USC, 1-loss conference champ, Clemson, 1-loss conference champ. Which one of those 4 teams would get in? That would be a debate right there. I think it would probably just have to come down to the resume. Michigan probably not going to get in. They wouldn't be a conference champion, and they had just a really weak non-conference schedule. That's going to hurt them. Clemson they'd have a decent resume. USC would have a decent resume. Oklahoma, the Nebraska win, that's not very good, so that's going to hurt them. I have no idea what would happen if all 3 of those teams were to win their conference with just 1 loss, or even all 3 of them going undefeated. That would be really interesting to see if that did happen. But those are the 4 teams that seem most likely. I'll give you my prediction again in a couple of days, but this is the current playoff picture as we head into week 4 of the 2022 college football season. Give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.